Hello, everybody. My name is Ricardo Cabrera, and I am the operations manager here at the Latino Chamber of Commerce of Boulder County. And today we have Valerie Collins with us. She's an attorney at Towards Justice in Denver. And we're going to talk about workers' rights today. So, general topics about sick leave, worker safety, unemployment insurance, a whistleblower law or rule that I know is new, and some other general topics. But uh, Valerie, welcome. Tell us a
Thank you
little
for
bit
having
about
me.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. As you said, I'm Valerie and I work at Towards Justice, which is based in Denver. We are a nonprofit law firm and we are a workers' rights organization. So we are here to support workers and we do a lot of education and outreach as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming here and sharing all this much needed information that it's good to know. A lot of people don't know what our rights are or that we have rights. And during COVID times, there's special rights that we have that we all should know about. And that's what we're talking about today. So with that, I'd say let's get to it and
Sure.
take it away.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see I have hopefully a interesting PowerPoint presentation. And can you see that?
I can see that. You're good to go.
Okay, wonderful. Let me. So I just went over, I'm going to skip these because they're just introductory slides and my contact information. And I'm going to go through this one fast as well, but it's going to be sprinkled throughout the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And I invite any and everyone to feel free to reach out to me personally, or you can go to Towards Justice's website as well. So for the agenda today, we're going to go through kind of two big buckets. And the first one will be laws that are specific to COVID, and that includes, workplace safety issues, time off, which is the time off issue is really big right now for sick leave in particular, unemployment insurance and how it relates to COVID and eligibility, and also Colorado's new whistleblower law that took effect in July that is already, and it's pretty novel and interesting. And then there's some more kind of non-COVID specific issues like protected concerted activity, working with your coworkers, and wages and kind of the legal issues that come up with wages. So let me move forward. I'm going to go back because I wanted to start quickly with worker safety rather than sick leave. So you can ignore this slide. So there are, up until now, one of the things that we've seen is not a lot of laws and certainly not a lot of regulations coming from the federal government. So currently, most workplace safety regulations and guidelines are coming within the state of Colorado, and some of them are really specific because they might be specific to each county. But each county public health website usually has really good fact sheets on what to expect and what employers are required to do and what employees are allowed to do in that regard. But that could change. So as soon as next month, the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, OSHA, Safety and Health Administration will likely put out some new guidelines next month. So kind of keep an eye out for those. But right now, there are some basic safety guidelines for employers to know and employees. And the main one is that employers are required to provide kind of basic PPE, personal protection equipment, and that's masks.
Mm-hmm.
And to encourage social distancing, proper ventilation, stuff like that, sanitizing high touch areas. These are all requirements. And if anyone is experiencing that their employer isn't doing these things, they should absolutely either reach out to us. You can reach out to your local county public health organization, and they will have good guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
What we're seeing is it's not, employers don't want to be safe. A lot of times it's just like a lack of information. And so
Right.
I just wanted to highlight that.
So
Yeah,
So let me ask you this. So this is an OSHA rule that you just mentioned, or is this a Colorado rule?
this is a Colorado rule.
Okay, okay, good. So that's good. I didn't know that. So they have to provide now, and this applies to all industries. So restaurants, industrial, public facing and not public facing.
Correct. Yep, that's
Excellent.
correct. And I mean, I'll talk about this a little bit later. There's
Hmm.
also a caveat here. Under the whistleblower law, Colorado's whistleblower law, there's also a provision that employees can use their own PPE if it's more effective.
Hmm.
So while, for example, employers don't have to give everybody the N95 masks, that's not a requirement. But if an employee wants to wear an N95, they are entitled to be able to wear it. So you can't say, oh, you can only wear, because we've seen, for example, masks that have like a logo or something on
Right.
them. So if an employee wants to wear kind of a higher strength, mask or equipment or gloves, they're entitled to do that as well. So that's just kind of the caveat, but employers don't have to provide that. So I just wanted to mention, but also to put on the radar that this might get a little bit more stringent with the new administration and with new OSHA guidelines that are
Hmm.
coming out. So just kind of keep an eye out for that. But right now, that's where the law stands. Um,
Okay.
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I hear now. What I'm hearing is that you have to have, you have to have one because it's safe, and you can have your own if it's safer, if you think so. But can an employer have some like guidelines? So if I have my mask that says "I hate people," and then my employer is going to say, "Well, no, you can't wear that,"
Yeah.
then I'm sure there's got to be some conversation there where. Like I can't wear a shirt that says "I hate people" because it doesn't help
Yeah.
my boss's
Yes.
business, and he can say, look, you can wear what you want as long as it's friendly and
Reasonable.
appropriate.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. And that hasn't changed. COVID has
Okay.
not changed that. The same way that an employer can say, tell someone not to wear a t-shirt like that before COVID, that they still are entitled to do that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice. Because I have a lot of those, right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, a lot of masks that say I
Yeah,
hate
I
everything.
hate I hate I hate everybody.
Yeah. So just kind of okay. So that's kind of the basic workplace safety. I'm gonna put this. Oh, we're already on our leave slide. Okay. So talking about sick leave, or
Okay.
other leave. This has been besides unemployment insurance, kind of the number one question that we get from folks who are reaching out. And it's also kind of complicated because it's evolving and it's changing. And you can see kind of all of these moving parts are kind of working together. But I'm going to go over just some really basic stuff. So the first thing to know, and that's not on the slide, is that there are federal laws about sick leave, and the most important one here is the Family Medical Leave Act. And so the Family Medical Leave Act allows an employee to take unpaid time off to take care of a family member for medical reasons. The important thing to know here in regards to COVID is that it now also includes the ability to take unpaid time off to care for a child if childcare is closed. But again, that's unpaid, so it's kind of like a fallback provision.
Mhm.
The one that's more kind of impactful is Colorado's Healthy Families and Workplace Act. And what that does is it entitles employees who are full time up to 2 weeks paid leave, and that's 80 hours. So what it doesn't cover, if you usually work 50 hours in a week, it'll only cover you up to 40. But it's 2 full weeks of paid leave at 100% the employee's regular pay rate. And people are entitled to take that leave if they are sick with COVID. And that means either if they've been diagnosed with COVID or if they have symptoms and they're seeking medical treatment. So
Mhm.
you are entitled to take time, paid time off, for example, to go get a test result if you think you have COVID, at 100% pay. And initially, when the pandemic started, you needed kind of documentation. What's important to note here is that now employees can kind of self validate. So you don't need a doctor's note. You can have a doctor's note. All you need is something in writing, a written statement that doesn't need to be in any particular form, that just says, I need to use the sick leave because I'm sick, or I'm not feeling well and I'm afraid I'm sick, or something like that. There's also a provision where you can take leave, and this is up to 2/3 paid time, your regular rate, if you're caring for a family member. If someone in your household has COVID and you need to take care of them, including a child, you are entitled to up to 2/3. And also, if you have been directed to quarantine or to isolate, and this happens when someone in your household is positive, has had a positive diagnosis, but you do not, um, what the law entitles you to do is to stay home for 2 weeks and get paid, because the whole, because just in case, you don't want to get everybody else sick at your workplace. And so that's an important qualification too. And it also entitles workers for or paid time off if you're taking care, I think I mentioned this, but if you're taking care of a child whose school has closed. So even if no one in your household is sick at all, but there was an outbreak at your kid's school, and so they can't go to school or to daycare or whatever, or your nanny is sick or something like that, you are entitled to paid time off for that as well. And it's up to 2 weeks.
So it sounds like it's 2 weeks once, right? So I have
Yes.
so like my brother got COVID and I have to take, or I got it and I can't. So that's 80 hours, and then 4 months later I got it again. I don't get another 80 hours. Okay. So and if I'm taking care of somebody else, not myself, then I get 2/3 paid time for 80 hours as well. Um,
Correct.
and it
Yes.
seems pretty flexible. So if it's my kid that can stay in school, or that have to take care of somebody, and for whatever reason that would allow me to be, I guess, safer at home rather than at the office, then I can take advantage of that and get my money for 80 hours or 2 weeks
Yes.
worth. Mm-hmm.
And it also applies. So the 80 hours is the max. So if you are a part-time employee, you are essentially entitled to kind of whatever your prorated amount would be. So if you normally work 20 hours a week, it's still just the 2 weeks that you're covered for that
Okay,
time.
okay, okay. So it's like 2 weeks or 80 hours,
Yeah. So
if you will. Because
yeah,
it's not 4 weeks then if I'm working
yeah,
20
yeah,
hours a week.
yeah. It's prorated. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah.
So
But
so let me ask you this: what happens if I get COVID a second time? Can I get fired? Or so maybe I don't have to go to work, but and not get paid, but do I get to keep my job?
Well, you should get, well, I mean, technically yes, but the thing with when relates to leave law is you wouldn't be entitled to additional leave. But if you are laid off, because this happens, especially when people are sick for a long period of time, like we have this 2 week window, but situations that you've mentioned come up all the time, where
Mm-hmm.
maybe initially you had to stay home to take care of someone in your household, and
Mm-hmm.
then you get COVID later on, or you get COVID and it takes months to
Mm-hmm.
recover, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
14 weeks, or the 2 weeks, 14 days is in theory, hopefully you'll be better, but what we're seeing is there are a lot of people who are not. So after that time, you would not be entitled to paid time off. However, you would potentially, or you would be entitled to unemployment insurance. So if you
Okay.
lost your
Mm-hmm.
position because
Mm-hmm.
you've been diagnosed with COVID, and they can't afford to keep you on, or whatever, it's been a long time, you would be entitled to unemployment insurance, and hopefully would kind of help fill that gap. It's
Right.
not going to be the same, but it's something. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It,
and it sounds good. I mean, there is a path forward in case, worst case scenario, and an employment. You're going to talk about that later, I know. So that's also something to keep in mind.
yes, yes. And I forgot to go through my slides. I always do this. So these slides are essentially what I just talked about. And it's a great segue into the unemployment insurance benefits, because that is the other huge area that we are seeing a lot of questions. Oh, this is just my silly slide. So essentially, just to like recap for the leave, you are probably entitled to something. Like if you are sick, this is confusing. There are a ton of kind of competing laws, but between unpaid and paid, you are entitled to something. And I think I have, oh, yep, I have my contact information
Mhm.
specifically again, just for that. If you have any questions, to feel free to reach out to me personally or to reach out to my organization. So unemployment insurance is the other huge issue that we've been seeing come through the door a lot. And the agencies are just swamped, including Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, who kind
Funny
of
slide.
processes. Yeah, thanks. Kind of processes this. I like to sprinkle in these little things. So in unemployment insurance can be incredibly difficult to navigate. And this is an area in particular where, if anyone has questions, definitely reach out. So for unemployment insurance, there's several different ways that you can qualify. The biggest is if you've lost your job. And this can happen even if you were let go, or as we're seeing a lot of, unfortunately, the business actually closed. So if you're, because there are businesses that haven't reopened yet or still kind of in this limbo status, if that has happened to an employee, that means that they would be qualified or entitled to unemployment insurance. And as I just mentioned, you also would be eligible if you've been diagnosed with COVID. Or if you had to quit your job because you have COVID and you've been instructed to quarantine, and it's more than that 14 days, right, that we were just talking about, you would also qualify for unemployment insurance. The thing that is kind of, I think, most important, not most important, but very important, I'm going to go back, is when you can refuse to work. And this comes up a lot, particularly in situations where if the employer is really not following standard health guidelines, or if you are a member of a particularly vulnerable group, a high risk group, if someone in your family is a member of a high risk group, there are a lot of people who don't feel safe returning to work for any of those reasons. And one thing that's really important to keep in mind is that you still may be eligible for unemployment benefits in that situation. It also, another big category is if you're not able to work because of childcare issues. So if your child's school is closed, or if your nanny is sick, or something like that, and you're not able to be remote, which a lot of folks are not, you could be entitled to unemployment benefits in that situation as well. Um, and that has come up a lot. One thing to keep in mind, though, what you're not entitled to benefits if you just kind of have like a generalized fear of returning. And unfortunately, this has happened a lot where people are like, oh, my employer isn't really taking this that seriously. And, sometimes my coworker, like his mask goes below his nose or something like
Right.
that, like kind of like more vague general discomfort about being out and about during
Mhm.
COVID, which is totally valid. But in terms of unemployment benefits, that does not rise to the level. Like there has to be some type of hook, like either you're a vulnerable, particularly vulnerable person, or you live with someone, or your employer is really not doing its job in kind of maintaining those safety guidelines.
So, wow, it sounds like it's following the theme here of if you can't work, if your business closed, the additional part, for unemployment, as we spoke before from the law, is that now if your business closes, and generally safety, personal and environment, and your environment, your surrounding safety, you can qualify for unemployment insurance, all being reasonable, as you explained. You can't just say, I want it because I can, right? You can't know. There has to
Yeah.
be a true reason. So is this valid also for employees as well as like self-employed? So what if I'm a sheetrocker and I'm self-employed and suddenly, you know, there's no work or I don't feel
Yeah.
safe, can you go for unemployment that way as well?
Well, what we've been encouraging people, so there's no guarantee. So if you're self-employed or if you're like, you consider yourself like an independent contractor,
Hmm.
we have been encouraging folks to still apply because in a lot of ways, even though you might be self-employed, the way you're kind of set up your business, it might mean that you're still an employee under the law, which entitles you to benefits. So it's
Hmm.
possible that you are the only person, you're self-employed, it's just you're the only worker, doing
Hmm.
whatever the task is, and you still might be eligible. So it's not always kind of a clear cut, but we've been encouraging folks to apply anyway,
Right.
because it's possible. Yeah.
So if you're paying, I mean, companies pay for unemployment insurance for their employees. It's the law, right? Is that kind of like the guideline? If you're paying it, then you should be.
No, because that
Oh,
actually has been suspended.
uh-oh.
So right now, so because of COVID, because so usually it's kind of linked to taxes, and so employers are kind of paying into that unemployment benefit system through their taxes, and if there are a lot of former employees who are collecting unemployment insurance, the employer may see a bump, right? Like they may have to pay for that a little bit. It's a small part. But since COVID, there's no longer that link, because usually, there's so many people who are unemployed, right? So it's kind of like a basic fairness issue where, employers should not be penalized because of COVID, right?
Hmm.
Because everything is out of their control. So typically that's true that there is that link, but right now there's not.
Okay, excellent. So unemployment insurance, there's the special um, COVID layer that has been created, and it will go on until we can say we're out of it, and the state decides that we're safe. And good for us, good for them. I love to hear when the government is doing good
Yeah.
things for everybody, and in this case, unless you don't know, which is why we're here today, there are a lot of good things you can take advantage of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we've
Yeah.
seen people come in the door who just assumed that they weren't eligible and haven't applied. And we're like,
Hmm.
no, like, fill out the form. It's a pain in the butt, but it could be really worth it because you might be eligible. One big kind of caveat here to mention, unlike the sick leave law, which is applicable to all employees, undocumented workers are not eligible for
Mm.
unemployment
Hmm.
benefits in Colorado. Um, and yeah, so and it's a problem. We've seen a lot of
Yeah.
people, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of nonprofits popping up to kind of help
Hmm.
fill that gap, but it obviously is not enough.
Hmm.
And so yeah, so that's kind of a big caveat and a big carve
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but it's it is what it is, right? If there are some nonprofits, as you mentioned. I know Boulder County has this program called No Worker Left Behind,
Huh.
which is not a total solution for everything, but it's a little help for that particular group, and they get a little financial help so they can get by, um, and other groups as well that are trying to fill that gap, which is there, and the community does want to help. So if you're one of those and you need help, look around, ask to some of your local community businesses because they will have more answers than we have today. But there are answers for
Absolutely. Yes. Please do.
you. Okay,
Uh, oh,
go ahead.
okay. So I was going to just kind of move on to the whistleblower law, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, I've forgotten to, oh, no, I didn't. Um, my slides, I always forget the slides. So Colorado actually has a really, really interesting new whistleblower protection law, and it is specifically aimed at providing workers and organizations with kind of more tools to address COVID workplace safety issues in violation. And essentially, what the law does is it makes it unlawful for an employer to discriminate against, retaliate, or take any adverse action against a worker who raises concerns about workplace health and safety. That's in regard to a public health emergency, which COVID very much is a public health emergency. And this law is incredibly important because what we've seen is a lot of retaliation. People saying that, they learn their rights and they go back to their employer and say, wait a minute, you're supposed to be providing masks, or you're supposed to be facilitating social distancing, or whatever, whatever the issue is. And they don't get scheduled or something the next week, or something else. They get assigned, some undesirable task or something like that. And that is 100% unlawful under Colorado's new whistleblower law. The thing about the whistleblower law that really makes it kind of unique is the fact that an organization or a representative, so typically we think of whistleblowers as individuals, and they come forward and they say, my employer isn't doing this right. But also that's really scary, right? Even with these whistleblower laws, there's obviously a high kind of risk or fear of retaliation. But what Colorado's new law does is it allows an employee to kind of designate someone else, including an organization. So like a nonprofit or something like that, to be their representative in that complaint. And so the worker themselves doesn't necessarily have to like put their neck out on the line. It's based on their knowledge, but someone else can actually file the complaint with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. And it's meant to encourage that type of reporting, because right now there's not a lot of incentive. Everyone's scared. Everyone wants to keep their job. You don't want to tell on your employer. It's hard. And so this new whistleblower law is really helping folks kind of facilitate that type of information and that type of information sharing to make workplaces in general more safe.
So I mean, and you pegged it. I mean, it's nice that the law is there, but I can see how somebody's going to come back and say, "Wow, you ran, you told on me, and that's not good." And it doesn't help anybody. So what would be best practices? I'm sure there's a place where you can anonymously go and do this if you go directly to the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. And of course, as you said, you could go through other organizations. But what's the easiest way? I mean, because not everybody, a lot of people, and I try not to get involved with the law or with lawyers as much as I can, and this is like a straight shot for that. So what would a best practice be to say, hey man, to your employer, or how to talk about it without escalating something that doesn't need to be, if it can be a 30-second conversation?
Yeah. I mean, I would recommend, like, if you don't want to actually file a complaint or alert, a public health organization, I think alerting a public health organization, honestly, is kind of the most baseline, because you don't have to leave your information. But obviously if it's a small workplace, you can kind of put connect the dots, but to direct employers at resources. On the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment website has a lot of resources specifically for employers. And what we've been seeing isn't so much employers hoping everybody gets sick, right? It's more of just a lack of information. And when you have like just a one-page PDF that says here's what you're supposed to do, and also here is how you do it, it can be incredibly helpful. And it's just kind of a quick easy fix, because a lot of these are pretty quick and don't require a whole like equipment or anything like that. And a lot of these solutions are pretty simple, so I would definitely recommend that as well.
And that's so true. So many of the safety solutions that businesses and locales can do to help are not hard. They're easy. They're cheap. I mean, there's free masks everywhere. You can get masks. That's not an issue. You can change your filter on your AC to help clean the. That's not hard. It's not rocket science. You don't need an engineer to do anything. Open your doors, for example, or the social distancing with markers on the floor is a little Scotch tape, right? And as long as people know and follow them, you can help the community stay safe and and avoid any complaints, I guess, because the public can do that as well, not just the employees. The public can come in and say, this business is not following the rules that are recommended by your county.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've seen is not necessarily a fear that the public is going to do what you just mentioned, say, hey, wait a minute, you're not following the rules. There's more of a fear, at least kind of the story, anecdotally, what we've been seeing. There's a fear of telling customers, put on your mask, or
Hmm.
making customers kind of follow the guidelines,
Hmm.
and they are supposed to. And but that's
Right.
kind of what we've been seeing more, because time, everything's tight, right? And you want customers, so you don't want to annoy them or whatever. But
Hmm.
that's another kind of important requirement that employers are required to do, and that can just be as simple as like putting a sign up that says, this is, you have to wear a mask to come in here because it's the law, and we're
Hmm.
going to enforce it, and kind of put everybody on alert as soon as they come in the store, because that's another important component of social distancing and safety practices as well.
Yep, and we should all be following that. And I know signs are, at least in Boulder County, there are
Yeah.
Boulder County law. You have to have a sign that says mask.
Yeah.
Um, and I know many places where, I mean, I'm guilty like anybody else to get up, I'm in a restaurant or somewhere, and I get up to go to the restroom and I forget the mask. Yeah, I don't get very far before somebody tells me, put your mask on. And of course, there's the other side of the coin where nobody even notices that I didn't have the mask on, which is not often. I have to be fair to the places that I go to. There, it's not often, and they're polite, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and if we can come up with a way to train the trainer, right? So teach the employees as well to say, here's how to handle it. It's not a
Yeah.
gotcha moment. It's
Yeah.
not a you're gonna go to we're gonna put you on the box moment. It's like please remember to put your mask on or something. There's got to
Exactly.
be a way. I
Yeah.
keep thinking of the soccer cards. I'll put a yellow card
The
in the
yellow.
table that says mask, and two yellows says you're out of here or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so important. And it's, yeah, I agree. It's so important that everyone, kind of general members of the public, employees, employers, are all on the same page, because all of this is meant for all of us, and to kind of slow and eventually stop the spread. So
Hmm.
I absolutely agree. So, oh, yep, I did it again with the whistleblower. Um, I don't, I should just give up with this.
Yeah.
So the next kind of topic we have, are, I'm going to switch, go through there. Okay, so now I'm going to get into just a little bit about, are we good for time?
Yes, we have about 10 minutes left.
Okay, wonderful. Just a couple kind of big picture issues. And these are rights that existed before COVID. But one of the things that we're seeing is that it's particularly important now. And there's a lot of intersection coming up, with these laws. So the National Labor Relations Act is a federal piece of legislation. It's old, it's from the New Deal. And what that does is it is a right, given to employees to organize. And often, that organizing comes with or from a union. But the important thing here is that, that's not all that the act protects. It also protects a far, more common but less known right. And that is concerted activity. And kind of simply put, it's, whenever you have workers who are coming together to impact a term or condition of employment, that's protected. And they're allowed to talk about the workplace and to talk about improving their workplace, without retaliation. And it's something that is so often overlooked, and so few people know what that means. And, obviously, like, the big retaliation could be getting fired or something. If you are like, hey, boss, we'd like more masks or something like that, because this is a health and safety issue. It impacts our working conditions. And they say, okay, you're fired. That's like a really extreme example, and it does happen. But it also protects against that, but it also protects against having like perks taken away, or receiving fewer hours, or change in shifts, or being threatened or interrogated about what you're talking about with your, coworkers, or something like this. And this happens a lot, more, I mean, just constantly. And I think it's,
Hmm.
it's because people just don't know that this is a right. And so particularly in the time of COVID, we've kind of stressed that this is a right that most people have. There are exemptions from this law, particularly, it comes, a huge part in Colorado is agricultural workers are currently exempted from this law. But it's just important to kind of have in the back of your mind that this is a right that employees have. Uh, uh, this is my little thing.
Yeah.
Um, I like these little guys. But yeah, so if you're working together, and it doesn't have to be a group, it can just be two people. And in some instances, it can be one person. If you're preparing, like if you're going to start talking to your coworkers about a term or condition of employment, it can cover that as well. So we like to highlight that as well. And then the other kind of big, obviously wages were an issue, or wage theft happened before COVID. I think we've been seeing a little bit more of it lately because everything is so tight, and everyone's kind of struggling and trying to make ends meet. But there is this concept that's out here that still exists, of wage theft. And that it can include, not being paid at all for an hour or whatever, not being paid overtime, illegal deductions, or violating leave law, because a leave benefit, for example, if your employer is making you work through lunch, that's money. I mean, that's, and if you are normally, you're supposed to be paid for that time and you don't get it, and it's not being, you're not getting let out early or something like that, that's also wage theft as well. So it's not necessarily always just the obvious examples, but we're still seeing that as well. And I just have a slide here just to kind of go through the minimum wage law. Sometimes it differs a little bit. For example, in Denver, it's a little bit higher than the rest of Colorado. And I cannot for the life of me think of Boulder County, but it's important to check that out as well. Also, this includes overtime, like I mentioned, and I think I'm gonna go through relatively quickly through these because they're not as crucial. And also the information is kind of more readily available. These are older laws and older standards, and so they're more likely to just kind of be out there in the public sphere in terms of information. Okay, so this is important. This is like, who do you talk to? Who do you reach out to? If your employer has violated the law, and I will also say, as an employer, if you want to make sure you're compliant with the law, and it kind of depends on what the issue is. If it's a wage issue, you would go to the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. If it's a safety issue, you could go to your local public health administration, or the Occupational Safe and Health Administration, OSHA, which is a federal agency. You can also reach out directly to me and to Towards Justice. And let me just make sure my contact information is here. Yes. And we can, even if we are not able to kind of represent anyone directly, or give you an answer, we will absolutely find a resource for whoever needs it. And that's always true, regardless of what the issue is.
Excellent. Just so you all know, I'm going to put this information down here as well in the description of this video, so you can just click it. You don't have to write it down because it's there. And Valerie already told us several times that she's available for help. So please don't be afraid to call and ask for help. I mean, it's, for me, and I'm sure for you guys as well, it's really confusing to know where to go, what organization takes care of what, because they're all government institutions and there's one for everything. And I would just, personally call Valerie first, because she knows and she can not only tell you where to go, but advise you maybe and suggest how to approach something. Because really many times, and you can solve something with a simple conversation, whether it's your boss or your friend or your landlord, which is another issue that's happening nowadays with COVID. Everybody's on the same boat, and COVID is affecting everybody. So a simple conversation a lot of times fixes everything. and you just have to know what to say and how to say it, right? Because you got to be nice, and you know, that not unlike my mask, you know, which I really don't have one like that. I don't have one like that, but
Okay, sure.
but yeah, keep that in mind. And Towards Justice is a nonprofit. It's accessible and free for everybody, and I'd say use it. And anything else, Valerie, that you want to add to our conversation today? It's been great. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure there's people watching as well. So, what else do you have?
That's really it. I mean, I really think the main takeaway here should be that whoever you are, employee, employer, you know, this is uncharted territory, but there are resources available. You're not alone, and there's help, and just reach out and use that help as much as you can.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you, Valerie. This has been awesome. It's been incredible. Thank you for all this information. I am going to stop sharing your screen here so people can see us.
Okay.
Cancel full size. Let's see if let's see. Stop sharing. Where's the stop
Here,
sharing?
I can do it.
Okay,
Here.
thank you.
There
Hi, we're back.
Hi.
We were about this big on the screen throughout the whole conversation.
Okay.
So anyway, so thanks again. This has been awesome. Before we go, I have a surprise question for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What is your favorite word?
Oh, my favorite word.
Yep.
Love.
Yes.
Do I have to explain why? Or
no, you don't have to explain why. Thank you for that. And with that, we'll finish today. And thank you for everything. And
thanks for having me.
Until next time.